I'm Gloria, standing on the balcony of our apartment, overlooking the shimmering expanse of Lake Michigan. I can't help but reflect on how far we've come. The city below is a vibrant tapestry of lights and life, a constant reminder of the journey that has led me to this moment. It all started with a cruel bet, a humiliation that seemed like the end of the world at the time. Little did I know that it would be the beginning of something extraordinary. It was a night like any other at the annual banquet of Sterling Industries, a prestigious company owned by the formidable Victor Sterling. The grand hall was filled with the echoes of laughter and the scent of expensive champagne. I was just a cleaning staff, quietly going about my work, collecting empty glasses and stacking plates onto a rolling cart. Every extra hour meant a little more money to send to my mother, who had fallen ill and was struggling to make ends meet. I had once dreamed of becoming a journalist. I even had a degree from a reputable university. But dreams don't pay bills, and I had to do what I could to support my family. As I worked, I noticed a group of young men at the far end of the room, their expensive suits slightly rumpled and their ties loosened. They were laughing and talking loudly, their arrogance palpable. One of them, Ethan Sterling, caught my eye. He was tall and handsome, with a confident smirk on his face. He was the son of Victor Sterling, the heir to the company. I recognized him immediately, but I didn't dare look up. I just wanted to finish my shift and disappear. But fate had other plans. As I reached across the table to collect a plate, my hand slipped and the plate crashed to the floor, shattering into a million pieces. Greasy scraps splattered across my uniform, and all eyes turned towards me. "Would you look at that?" One of the men crowed. "The perfect disaster. Perfect loser." Another snickered. "She's a real gem, isn't she?" Their mocking laughter filled the room, and I felt my cheeks burn with humiliation. I wanted to run away, but my feet were rooted to the spot. I was trapped. Ethan raised a hand, and the room fell silent. He studied me with a calculating glint in his eyes, the same way one might examine a piece of furniture. "What's your name, rag girl?" he asked, his voice smooth and authoritative. "Gloria," I whispered, staring at the floor. A slow, predatory smile crept across Ethan's face. "Tomorrow morning, I want you in my office. You'll be at my disposal for the entire day." "Understood." I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. "Good," he said, clapping his hands once and turning back to his friends with a triumphant grin. "Gentlemen, get your wallets ready. This is going to be the easiest $20,000 I've ever won." The four of them laughed as they sauntered toward the exit, still shoving and joking, leaving me kneeling on the floor, surrounded by shards of broken porcelain. I didn't cry, not here, not where they could see. I just kept collecting the pieces, one by one, my hand shaking, the weight of their cruelty pressing down on my chest like a stone. The next morning, I stood outside the employee entrance of Sterling Industries, clutching the strap of my worn canvas bag and forcing myself to breathe. My shift technically started at 8, but I had been there since 7, too anxious to sleep. All night, the sound of their laughter had echoed in my head. Inside, the atmosphere was colder than usual. The lobby, usually buzzing with polite chatter, was subdued. As I wheeled my cleaning cart across the marble floor, the elevator door slid open, and a woman in a pencil skirt and heels stumbled out. Her mascara was streaked, and she clutched a small cardboard box filled with personal belongings. No one spoke to her. They stepped aside in silence as she hurried toward the revolving doors. I recognized her, a junior accountant who had been laughing too loudly at last night's after-party. "Poor thing," one receptionist whispered to another. "Mr. Sterling fired her first thing this morning. He was furious when he heard what happened." My heart pounded harder. If they were firing people over that night, what chance did I have upstairs? Raised voices spilled from the hallway leading to the executive offices. I froze as I passed by, the words too sharp to ignore. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" The deep, thunderous voice belonged to Victor Sterling. It carried the weight of decades of authority, a man who had built an empire from nothing. My board is laughing behind my back because my son thinks he's the ringmaster of a circus. "Calm down, Dad," Ethan replied, his tone casual, infuriatingly dismissive. It was a joke. A joke. Victor's fist slammed against a desk. A young woman was humiliated. A career ruined. And now there's a video circulating of it all. You think that's funny? You think that's how leaders behave? There was a pause. Then Ethan's voice again. Smoother, colder. People will do anything for money. It's not my fault. She didn't think ahead. Maybe she'll learn a lesson. Enough, Victor snapped. Today is my 60th birthday. It is my night, and you will not embarrass me again. No bets, no games, no childish stunts. Do you understand me, Ethan? A beat of silence.
Yeah, sure.
You know me, Ethan muttered. Victor's footsteps stormed past the door, the scent of his cologne lingering even after the elevator doors closed. I exhaled slowly and pressed a hand to my chest. The image of that crying accountant burned in my mind. Maybe I should quit before they had the chance to fire me. But quitting wasn't an option. Rent was due next week, and my mother's medical bills were piling up. I needed this job. Come in, a voice said sharply from behind the frosted glass door. I startled. Ethan was looking straight at me through the office window. I swallowed hard and stepped inside. The room was vast, lined with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago skyline. Ethan sat behind a mahogany desk, spinning a pen between his fingers, his jaw tight. Victor's words had clearly stung, but his expression shifted to a lazy smirk the moment our eyes met. Punctual. Good, he said, leaning back in his chair. We have an important evening ahead of us. I clutched the strap of my bag tighter. Mr. Sterling, I don't want to do this. Please, it'll be humiliating. Everyone will laugh at me. Ethan tilted his head, feigning thoughtfulness. One night of humiliation or unemployment starting today. Your choice. His voice was smooth but merciless. If you walk out that door, I'll make sure security collects your badge before you reach the lobby. My breath caught. I thought of my mother, the woman who had always encouraged me to follow my dreams. I thought of the past due notices on my kitchen table. I couldn't afford pride. Not today. What? What do I have to do? I whispered. Ethan's smirk widened. Be yourself. Be exactly who you are, clumsy, awkward, out of place. That's all I need. You'll do just fine. Heat crept up my neck. I bit the inside of my cheek to stop the tears from rising. Ethan opened his wallet and pressed a handful of bills into my palm. Here, around $600. Buy yourself a dress and a proper hairstyle. My driver will take you and bring you back. Don't even think about running off. The door opened, and a tall man in a black suit stepped in. The driver, silent and watchful. I realized he wasn't just transportation. He was there to make sure I followed orders. Half an hour later, I stood under the harsh lighting of an upscale boutique, surrounded by silk and satin I could never afford. The driver waited just outside, arms folded. I could choose anything I wanted. Sequins, plunging necklines, bold colors, but none of it felt right. Instead, my hand settled on a deep crimson dress, simple and timeless, no glitter, no extravagance, just clean lines and quiet dignity. I paired it with modest heels and had my hair swept into a soft, elegant bun at a nearby salon. When I caught my reflection in the mirror, a different woman stared back. Not a joke, not a punchline. A quiet defiance lived in the tilt of my chin. If I was going to be paraded as a fool, I would do it on my terms. The rain had started to fall over Chicago by late afternoon, misting the windows of the small restaurant tucked away on a quiet side street not far from the river. Ethan sat at a corner table, scrolling absently through his phone, but his thoughts were miles away. His father's voice from that morning still rang in his ears, heavy with disappointment and anger. Victor Sterling had built an empire from the ground up, and yet his son, his only heir, seemed determined to tear it down with arrogance and foolish stunts. Ethan clenched his jaw and shoved the phone into his jacket pocket. Tonight he would win the bet and prove he didn't care what anyone thought. Not his father, not the board, not anyone. And then I walked in. For a moment, he forgot how to breathe. Gone was the trembling, messy janitor in the shapeless uniform. The woman stepping into the restaurant wore a deep crimson dress that hugged her frame with quiet elegance. Her hair, swept into a soft bun, framed her face delicately. She moved with poise, not swagger, with dignity, not desperation. Ethan's phone slipped from his hand and clattered onto the table. "Gloria," he asked, his voice lower than he intended. "Yes," I said simply, meeting his eyes before sliding into the seat he held out for me. "You cleaned up well," he murmured, trying to summon his usual nonchalance but failing. There was something disarming about my composure, something that didn't fit into the joke he had planned. "I did what you asked," I replied calmly. "I am here dressed for your game. But before tonight goes any further, I want to understand why you're doing this." Ethan raised an eyebrow, leaning back in his chair.
Why?
"Because it's funny. Because my friends and I needed some entertainment. Because life's too boring when everything's handed to you." I didn't blink. "Or because you're terrified of disappointing your father." The words landed like a stone. Ethan's smirk faltered. "Excuse me? You hide it well," I continued softly, "behind arrogance and bets and cruelty. But you wouldn't go to this much trouble if his opinion didn't matter. You want to prove something, maybe to him, maybe to yourself." Silence stretched between us. Rain tapped against the window pane. Finally, Ethan exhaled and looked away. "You think you've got me figured out, huh?" "No," I said, my voice gentler now. "But I think I understand more than you realize." I folded my hands on the table and took a steadying breath. I grew up in a small town. My parents were hardworking people, always teaching me the value of integrity and hard work. Then my mother got sick. We lost everything trying to pay for her treatment. And my father, he couldn't cope. He started drinking, and he's been in and out of rehab ever since. So I left school. I work wherever I can, and every month I send him money so he can eat and pay rent. I clean floors because it's the only way to keep him from disappearing entirely. My words were quiet but unwavering. Ethan listened, his fingers tightening around the edge of the table. "I didn't choose this life," I said. "But I choose to stay because someone has to." Something shifted in Ethan's expression, the cocky veneer thinning. He rubbed a hand over his jaw and spoke without looking at me. "I was 14 when my mother died. My father, he was devastated. But instead of falling apart, he buried himself in work. And then he expected me to be perfect, to be him. Nothing I did was ever enough. Every mistake felt like a scar on the company name. And I hate it. I hate the pressure, the expectations, the way every room I walk into is already decided before I speak." I watched him carefully. In that moment, the arrogant air vanished, replaced by a boy who had never quite healed. "It's lonely," he added quietly, "being the son of Victor Sterling. Everyone assumes I have everything, but they don't see how little control I actually have." A silence settled over the table, not heavy, but fragile. I reached across and brushed my fingertips lightly against the back of his hand. "I'm sorry," I said simply. "For both of us." Ethan startled at the touch, glancing up at me. "Yeah," he whispered. "Me too." The moment hung between us, delicate, unspoken. Then Ethan pulled his hand back and straightened his posture as if catching himself in a lapse of weakness. His trademark smirk returned, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "But none of that changes tonight," he said, forcing levity into his tone. "We still have a deal. You'll be my date. We'll go to the party, and I'll collect my winnings. My father will hate it, which is just an added bonus." I held his gaze, sadness flickering behind my calm expression. "If that's what you want," I said softly. "It is," Ethan replied. But even as he said it, his voice lacked conviction. As the rain outside turned into a steady downpour, we sat in silence. Two people from different worlds, bound together by circumstance and pride, unaware that tonight would change them both, and nothing about the game would go according to plan. The Sterling Ballroom was a cathedral of glass and gold. That night, a string quartet played softly in the corner. Crystal chandeliers spilled warm light over tables dressed in white linen, and the air smelled faintly of roses and aged whiskey. Chicago's most powerful had gathered here: CEOs, senators, venture capitalists, even a few old money families whose names carried weight far beyond the Midwest. All had come to celebrate the 60th birthday of Victor Sterling, the man who had built an industrial empire from a single factory floor. I stood just inside the entrance, my hands trembling as I clutched the small clutch bag I'd borrowed from a friend in my crimson dress. I looked nothing like the woman who scrubbed floors for a living, but I felt like an imposter all the same. My pulse thudded in my ears as I scanned the glittering room. This was a world I had only ever glimpsed from a distance, a world of money, privilege, and power that had always existed on the other side of the glass. "Relax," Ethan murmured beside me, slipping a hand to the small of my back as we stepped forward. "You look fine. Better than fine, actually." I glanced up at him, searching for a trace of mockery, but his gaze was steady. "I don't belong here," I whispered. "Neither do I," he said with a rueful smile. "But here we are." As we crossed the room, I braced myself for ridicule, for whispers, smirks, or sideways glances, but none came. Instead, a silver-haired man with a distinguished air stepped forward to shake Ethan's hand. "Ethan, my boy," he said warmly. "You've grown up since I last saw you. And your companion, what grace, what poise." He turned to me and bowed slightly. "It's a pleasure, Mississippi." "Thank you," I stammered, caught off guard. Another man approached, stroking his neatly trimmed beard as he studied me. "What a rare elegance you possess, my dear," he said before taking my hand and pressing it lightly to his lips. "Your presence is a delight." The compliments continued as we moved deeper into the room. People who had once dismissed Ethan as a spoiled heir now regarded him with newfound respect because of me. I answered polite questions with quiet intelligence, discussing art, literature, and history with a calm confidence that surprised even myself. Slowly, the knot in my stomach loosened. Across the room, Victor Sterling watched all of this unfold, his expression unreadable. At first, suspicion flickered in his eyes. He had heard about his son's foolish bet and expected the worst. But as he saw me converse effortlessly with his oldest partners, his gaze softened. Finally, he approached his son and spoke quietly enough for only Ethan to hear. "Your companion is remarkable," Victor said, glancing toward me. "It seems I may have misjudged your taste." For Ethan, the words struck deeper than any praise he'd ever received. They were simple, almost casual, but from his father, they meant everything. For the first time in years, Victor wasn't disappointed in him. Pride, real, genuine pride, lit his father's eyes. Ethan felt something shift inside him, something far more satisfying than any bet could ever bring. But the fragile peace shattered minutes later as the formal speeches ended and guests began to mingle freely. A familiar laugh sliced through the hum of conversation. Ethan's friends had arrived, the same ones who had placed the bet and now watched him with predatory amusement from near the bar. "Ethan," one of them called, clapping him on the back as he and the others approached. "Time for the show, my friend. We've been waiting all night." Another leaned in close, his breath heavy with liquor.
"Come on, man. We paid good money for this."
"Let's see your Cinderella dance." Before I could react, one of them draped an arm around my waist, pulling me close. "Tell us, sweetheart," he slurred. "Do you sweep the boardroom the same way you sweep the floors?" I flinched and tried to pull away, but his grip tightened. Panic and fury surged inside me. "Let go of me," I hissed. In an instant, Ethan was there. "Hands off," he snapped, shoving his friend back with more force than necessary. "Don't touch her." The man stumbled, laughing.
"Whoa, easy."
"What's your problem?" "She's part of the game, your game." "She's under my protection," Ethan said, his voice like steel. "Get out, all of you." The four men stared at him, their drunken smiles faltering. "You've lost your damn mind," one muttered.